Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Social Work, SOSW, Master of Social Work, Counselling, MSWC. First year. MSW 002 Professional Social Work, Indian Perspective. Block-1 Evolution of Social Work Practice in India. 1 History of Social Work, State Initiatives.
History of social work in India is an age-old phenomenon. Though social work, as a profession, was recognized and developed by Western countries, yet the basis on which the profession rests upon very well exist in the foundation of Indian history. The seeds of evolution of social work could be explored in world ideologies, i.e., secular, humanism, Protestantism, rationalism, welfarism, liberalism, democracy, and utilitarianism. The notion of welfare stemmed up in India in the roots of dharma. The history of human sufferings and selfish desire too persisted in human society, and so existed the mutual assistance to provide protections to humanity. History speaks volume of initiatives taken by kings, queens, landlords, foreign conquerors and invaders, and also under the system of diarchy and later under the constitutional reform of 1935, which ushered in a new era of popularly elected government in the provinces. Social work emerged as a profession from the perspectives of social services, charity, reform and welfare. Social work traveled a long way from welfare to empowerment and development, and the present emphasis of the profession is protecting and promoting people's rights. In this section you will find details on the following: initiatives by local rulers of ancient and medieval period, state initiatives during colonial period, post-independence state and central initiatives. 1.2 Initiatives by locale rule rs, kings, queens, landlords INANCIENTINDIA. Strong ethical and spiritual values were part of Indian traditions since early Vedic period. The seeds of human development were served since the origin of Indian society. The spirit of social service manifested itself in various ways in different spheres of life, and inspired both individuals and organized group of people in society. Dimensions of welfare during ancient times evolved in diverse ways, but we shall touch upon important phases only, i.e., pre-Vedic, Vedic and the golden era of Gupta period. Pre-Vedic period has been the age of invention like other societies of Europe and Greek, and India has not been an exception to it. Human beings' relation with environment was existing since beginning and was the basis of survival. The society had a great deal of planning during this period, introducing urbanization with planned structure and architecture. It is believed that institutions like law, custom, agriculture, religion existed and guided the people before Aryans migrated to India. People's self-initiated indigenous systems were very much at place before the Aryans arrived. Later, the discoveries in 1922 to 23 AD inform about the technology used in Harappan and Mohenjo-daro in Sindh. The excellent and advanced town planning shows the acceptance of each class in society, i.e., rich and poor. The designing of the house and the pattern were such that they show in advance architecture and administration, which was need-based. Welfare administration is well reflected through advanced and well-planned public spaces, the drainage system. This provides the pattern of community life with set rules as an example of people's friendly society. It is worth to mention that high level of respect and dignity were endorsed to women. The gender inequality has become a challenge today, but it is proud to mention that high ideas of social work were practiced during Indus Valley civilization. Not only human beings, even the animals were respected. Lord Shiva has been depicted as Pashupati, Lord of Animals, in the architecture of this primitive civilization. The Vedic period provides life's highest orders, which is found in the Aryans' scriptures entitled Veda, i.e., Rigveda, Samveda, Yajurveda, Atharvaveda. It emphasized that the religious hymns and music, sacrifices and knowledge are the soul of human life. The learning of Veda was called Shruti, which was memorizing through listening. One of the finest skills of casework counseling is listening, which was practiced in the Pathashala, the school, mode of education where the Guru, the teacher used to recite and the disciples practiced the listening in oratory skills and learned the lessons. It is during Vedic period we locate state authority in the form of family and tribe. Mazumdar informs that the family served as the foundation of the state. A number of families, bound together by real or supposed ties of kindred, formed a clan. Several clans formed a district, and a number of these districts compose a tribe, which was considered to be the highest political unit. The monarchy involved many officials to ensure welfare and protection of people. There were messengers and spies to assess people's feelings towards the state, monarchy and affairs related to society. Even today we find that assessment of needs and understanding and prioritizing these needs becomes the most important steps towards problem solving. The essential institutions invariably constitute the core of social living even today were marriage, education, religion, laws etc., which emerged during the Vedic period. The assemblies called as sabhas and samitis were constituted for decision-making and ensured people's participation. Charity in Vedic era was considered as morality. Helping the needy and beggar were praised as moral behavior. One can conclude that seeds of social welfare were sown in Indian subcontinent in its early civilizations. There are many stories in Indian literature on dana, charity. We have examples of Karna, a character from Mahabharata considered as Danveer, a giver, Raja Harishchandra as Satyavadi, truthful, and Raja Bhoj as an advocate whose justice mechanism was based on human values. The nature and the environment were considered part of religion to be respected and protected. The values, which are being looked for practice today, were part of history of Indian society. It was during the early Vedic era, women were enjoying equal positions. There is a reference of women, rishis, sage, apala, matriyi ghosha. Inequality on the basis of gender was missing, but in the later Vedic era, with the growth of large territorial state, women's status received the inferior status. The women have accomplished high status as educators, rishis and brahmacharinis, the person who follows a spiritual life for human peace and harmony. There were 40 sanskaras associated with human life, individuals' age, growth, and development. Out of 8 types of marriages, the Pesacha, Rakshasa and Asura marriages were considered as unlawful. We find similar contemporary challenge before social work in addressing the situations of increasing crimes against women. The ashrama system of ancient times delegated duties associated with relationships to provide discipline in human lives. The Gautam Buddha is recognized as one of the greatest men, popularly known as Lord Buddha, perhaps one of the social workers in ancient India. He left the palace, all comforts of life, and chosen to be with commons to understand the causes of human sufferings and find ways to life in peace and harmony. He went on searching the truth and acquired knowledge that prescribes 8 paths of life before he served millions of the sufferers from poverty, illiteracy and ill health. He trained himself by being with the mass and applaud the solutions of sufferings from and within the individuals, groups, and communities. Buddhism is now an well-established religion followed by millions across the world. The Mauryan Empire provides the information of separate department of administration and municipal boards. Chanda Ashoka, ferocious Ashoka, adopted Buddhism and devoted his life to humanistic values. The Eightfold Paths of Buddhism finds its relevance in social work principles. Peace, dignity and right to livelihood are living issues and frame ethical standards of a society and being practiced by the NGOs and civil society organizations in our times. The welfare initiatives by Asoka propounded the virtue of care and upliftment of his people by providing public business and facilities. Indian history hosts Charikar during the regime of Kanishka, who occupies the royal and highest place of honor for owning indigenous system of medical treatment. In the ancient state there is a mention of Bhai Satyagraha, a medical store in the city or town. Kotale mentioned about the veterinary surgeons who were in charge of cattle, horses and elephants. There was a provision of Samsthadhyaksa, controller of establishment who looked after public health, and fined caravellas. Contribution from eastern coast of Kalinga, who excelled in the arts of peace He hosted various public gatherings and initiated number of work of public utility like irrigation, construction of buildings, gardens, canals and recreational places. The ancient books such as Manusmriti by Manu, Arthashastra by Kautilya and Mahabharat by Vedavyasa have mentioned the political institutions as example of scientific governance. The origin of state as divine origin where the king was the representative of God had a mention in Manusmriti much before we learn about the origin of state. Arthashastra and Mahabharat talked about the electoral system much earlier. What Locke, Hobbes and Rousseau called it social contract theory 2000 years later. The safety and security of the subjects were the role and responsibility of the king. The king was elected by people. Arthashastra by Kautilya accounted state's role, which played an effective part over a man's social, economic, cultural, moral and even spiritual life. There was hardly any limit to the state's sphere of activities. It includes within the functions of the state not merely the security of life and property, administration of justice and such economic control, including nationalization of trade and industry, as is now being practiced and advocated by most advanced socialistic state, but also maintenance of proper relation between members of a family, the strict observance of rules prescribed by religion or social customs and etiquettes. Kautilya mentions various schools developed which speak of high volume on science of governance. It is very important to take note that not only governance, trade and industry, the state management system had control over various occupations and professions, i.e., physician, prostitutes, public amusements, and gambling, and prescribes it to be the duty of state to protect the helpless, the aged, and the orphan, and save people from social evils and natural calamities. The state lays down the principles of family system, the duties of each in relation to their family members, such as duties of father towards son and daughter, towards his mother and wife, towards brother and sister. In nutshell, state played an important role in social, economic, political and cultural life of an individual. Welfare state was an ideal feature of ancient India as the king was the custodian of law emerged from dharma. The mythologies talked about karma theory as well, which propounded the essence of deeds. The good deeds bear wealth of happiness. For the king, the state it is referred, praja sukhe sukham rajna. The king's happiness lies in the happiness of people, subjects. Welfare is most important of all business. The family was a focal unit of state and society. The duty of the family was stated and made obligatory. The breadwinner has to look after parents and all the dependents, widows and children in the family. A person embracing asceticism, without making any provision for the maintenance of his wife and children, used to be booked by the state. The state acted as legal guardian in protecting the rights of minor and needy in family. It acted as court and offenders were punished. Subsistence to the helpless women and orphans were taken care of by the state. The state trained them and provided them with state responsibilities as spies. The orphan children were given education in various fields. Poor relief was one of the important measures of the state. It was the duty of the state to help and support during natural calamities. Special efforts were taken for the dependents and sick people. The details of the families and needy was accounted by the state. The state treasury used to spend to meet the needs arised due to drought and famine. Kautilya informs about famine relief. Yuan Kuang referred to existence of numerous rest houses for the relief of needy and distressed travelers where food, medicines, and other needs were supplied. State provided employment work for those who were left over to their own fate, i.e., helpless widows, crippled women, mothers of prostitutes. The dependents were taken care of and they were trained to take up the responsibilities of state. The women who were single opted out as spies and informers to keep a check on people's move and intentions. The orphans were provided with all the facilities and were educated in various fields and then provided with jobs. People-friendly business policies were executed. It was the forte of the king to bargain with the traders in public. Price control was a state activity. Stringent punishments were attached to any kind of corruption. The traders were checked and booked on adulterated food, grains, vegetables and oils. Traders using incorrect balances and measures were penalized. They were charged with fine. The buildings and houses were rebuilt, water projects and irrigation were the initiatives taken by the state. The subjects were provided with relief material and money. The state suspended the land revenues, granted loans, seeds, distributed food to the people. Craft and weaving was one occupation women took up and state supported by resources and materials. Those who were landless worked as tillers and laborers. In state lands, establishments of labor courts were there to settle down disputes on wages and exploitation. The occupations of slaves were defined. The masters were cautioned not to use their serfs in mean work, such as carrying the dead, sweeping orger, urine or the like, or the leavings of waste food. One of the concerns of contemporary social work is to restore the rights of scavengers. In those days, the dignity of work was protected by the state as high order. The masters had no right to use female slaves to sexual pleasure. The municipal administration were responsible for construction of gardens, recreational centers, forest land, irrigation work, cremation grounds, feeding houses, and pilgrimage. The tasks like proper boundaries of villages, record the details of people and register their names, registration of sale and transfer of land, taking stock of number of family members and the cattles, fixing up taxes and collection and remission of taxes granted by the competent authority, account of occupation. Based categories, traders, merchants, laborers, artisans and slaves, record of birth and death, income and expenditure were maintained. The Gopas were authorized to maintain the inventory of evil characters and keep the details of a man and his property, income and expenditure. The responsibilities were delegated to Nagarpala and Sthanikas, who were in charge of city administration and local administration. The fraud and embezzlement with public account were considered as serious offense and punishments were listed to stop the corruption. The concept of welfare state has been beautifully summarized by Apastamba. According to this text, the state had to provide food, clothing, shelter and medical treatment to the people. No one in the kingdom shall suffer from hunger, sickness, cold or heat either through want or otherwise. Royal guest house at the capital was to be made open and accessible to all. It is well known that India has been ruled by different cultures, i.e. Aryan, Sultanate, Mughal and British. The Arab invasion expanded the trade and commerce. India exported products such as spices, cotton, textiles, shawls and muslins, pearls and precious stones, while Indian traders imported silver, vermilion, lead, gold, rose water, saffron and opium. During this period, Islam emerged as one of the religions directed on alms giving amount to 1/40 of one's annual income and fasting in the month on Ramzan, highlighting the virtues of self-control and contentment. The Indo-Arabian cultural intercourse provided the platform for Indian scriptures to move to other parts of the world as well. Ali, the fourth caliph, records that the land where books were first written and where wisdom and knowledge sprang is in India. Panchtantra, the book of morals taught through the stories of animals and birds, were translated in Arabic and were taken to Europe. India was considered as capital of knowledge and learning. The issue of animal protection and their dignity finds space in Hitopadesha. With the emergence of Sultanate, we find important contribution of Iltutmish, who was considered as patron of learning. Number of madarasas were built by him. He built educational institutions in Delhi and Multan. There was maktab attached to every mosque, so a special effort was made for education to be accessible to the people. The justice and administration of Sultanate period is recorded in the history as great ideals. Strong market policies, army, espionage system, construction, and introduction of coins were its strength. The contribution made by Sher Shah for the welfare and development of people finds vital place in Indian history. He built sarais, inn, and dak chois, police beats. An efficient postal system was set up and the roads were built to connect the cities. The gradual invasion laid down the foundation of Mughals in this country. During this period we find initiatives of secular philosophies, tax systems, and architect. Akbar is looked as social reformer who prohibited child marriage, issued strict orders for those who were indulged in alcoholism, introduced laws against slavery, constructed hospitals and centers of charity, reviewed the whole system of education. Separate grants were provided to pathshalas and schools. He eventually founded a new cultural order called Din-i-Ilahi, Divine Faith, a collection of morals from all the religion. We find references of high ordeals practiced by Shivaji, Maharana Pratap, Lakshmi Bai who fought for their people and nation. During this time Bhakti movement, religious movement, spread in the country. This preached high ideals of values and virtues of humanity. You will find a detailed account on the same as separate unit is designed which shall explore social work in different religion. 1.3 Initiatives by colonial rulers, French, British, Portuguese rule, etc. The colonial period represents an altogether new phase in the life of the country. There had been invaders and conquerors before, but they soon settled down as the natives of the country. The governments changed at the political center of the time without disturbing the continuing features of society, especially in the countryside. The colonial rulers were different in this respect, and with them came a variety of new social forces like religion, technology, education, a system of law and judicial administration, etc. The colonial era in India began towards the end of 15th century, when the Portuguese sailor, Vasco da Gama, established a trading presence in Goa. Rivalry between European powers saw the entry of the Dutch, British, and French among others form the beginning of the 16th century. European settlements in India. Many trading companies were formed in Europe for trade with India and other parts of Asia and Africa. These trading companies, which mainly belonged to Portugal, Holland, England, France and Denmark, established their trading centers in different parts of India too. Most of these centers were in the coastal areas and were used as warehouses for trading of goods. Portuguese settlements. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to arrive in India. The closing of traditional trade routes in Western Asia by the Ottomans and rivalry with the Italian states set Portugal in search of an alternate sea route to India. The first successful voyage to India by Vasco da Gama in 1498, when he arrived in Calicut, in Kerala. The Portuguese established a chain of outposts along India's west coast and on the island of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, in the early 16th century. They built the St. Angelo Fort at Kannur to guard their possessions in North Malabar. Goa was their prized possession and the seer of Portugal's viceroy who governed Portugal's empire in Asia. Portugal's northern province included settlements at Mumbai, Daman and Diu, etc. Bombay, Mumbai, was given to the British Crown in 1661. As part of the dowry of Catherine, Portuguese princess. British, English East India Company. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I of England accorded a charter, forming the East India Company to trade with India and Eastern Asia. The British landed in India in Surat. In 1612, permission was granted by the ruling sovereign, Jahangir, to open up outposts in Calcutta and Madras. The British soon took advantage of their position by actively supporting the kingdoms militarily and gradually entering their politics. The Anglo-French Wars of the 1700s saw the British and the French fighting proxy wars on behalf of the rulers. During the last of these wars, Robert Clive decisively defeated the French and greatly extended British rule. By early 19th century, the French were almost defeated and the British East India Company indirectly ruled most of India. In 1857 an insurrection in the army sepoys ensued. In the popular revolt of 1857, Sepoy Mutiny. This mobilized resistance, though short-lasting, was caused due to the widespread resentment due to British discriminatory and religious policies. As a result of this, India formally became a crown possession. At the height of British power in the closing part of the 19th century, the British Empire stretched from Burma, now Myanmar, to Afghanistan, covering almost the entire undivided Indian subcontinent consisting of modern-day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. French East India Company. Following the British, the French also established trading bases in India. At the height of French power in the mid-18th century, the French occupied most of the southern India and the area lying in today's northern Andhra Pradesh and Orissa. The French, however, suffered major military setback against the British, losing their possessions by the end of the 18th century. Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company established trading posts on different parts along the Indian coast. For some while, they controlled the Malabar East Coast, the Coromandel Suf Coast and Surat, 1616 to 1795. They conquered Ceylon, Sri Lanka, 1658 to 1796, from the Portuguese. The Dutch also established trading stations in Travancore and coastal Tamil Nadu as well as at Rajashahi. Present-day Bangladesh, Pipli, Hujali Chinchora and Murshidabad, present-day West Bengal, Balasore, Baleshwar or Belasur, in Orissa and Ava, Arakan, and Syriam present-day Myanmar, Burma. Ceylon was lost at the Congress of Vienna. In the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, where the Dutch having fallen subject to France, saw their colonies raided by Britain. The Dutch later became less involved in India, as they had the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, as their prized possession. Denmark was the last of the colonial powers to set foot in India. It established trading outposts in Tranquebar, Tamil Nadu, 1620, Serampore, West Bengal, 1775, and the Nicobar Islands, 1750s. At one time, the main Danish and Swedish East Asia companies together imported more tea to Europe than the British did. Their outposts lost economic and strategic importance, and Tranquebar, the last Danish outpost, was sold to the British in 1845. Other external powers. Other colonial nations such as Belgium, Italy and Germany did not set foot in India. The Spanish did not have territorial rights to India due to the line of demarcation drawn by Pope Alexander VI in 1493. The Japanese briefly occupied the Andaman and Nicobar Island during World War II. State initiatives during colonial period. The major focus of the colonial state was maintaining and expanding colonial territory. It was only by the beginning of the 19th century that it was compelled to devote some attention to the other aspects of administration, apart from the collection of revenue and the maintenance of law and order. Famines in India. India is a land of agriculture. Indian cultivators, from time immemorial, have depended on the monsoons for irrigation. There were hardly any canals or other modes of irrigation. Famine struck whenever the monsoons failed. Even when harvest was good, nothing could be stored because of the lack of storage facilities. There were 13 famines in colonial India between 1770 and 1860. There was no definite policy to deal with problem of famine and many experiments were made which proved quite unsuccessful during the first years of Crown Rule, 1860 to 1909. There were 20 major and minor famines and scarcities. From the experience of poor laws in England, the colonial state developed their famine relief policy that the greatest amount of needful help should be given to the needy, which gives smallest encouragement to undue reliance on it. This policy was slightly modified in 1861 when the state decided to provide matching grants to private agencies for meeting the costs of feeding the destitute during famines. Soon, the state was forced to give up its policy of saving life irrespective of the cost, as it was beyond their financial power to undertake. The seriousness of the frequent occurrence of famines made the colonial state appoint Famine Commission in 1880. Further famine code was developed in 1883. In spite of the recommendation of the Commission for the Famine Relief, Insurance and alternative source of employment for the surplus population depending on agriculture, the administrators were not interested in solving the problem. The Famine Codes of 1883 were modified from time to time on the basis of experience gained from the implementation of codes. By the end of 19th century, there was a change in the attitude of the state in favor of prevention of famines. It can be noticed that the social work profession also stresses more on prevention aspects. The major famine took place in 1907-08 and after that there was no famine in colonial territory until the Great Famine of Bengal in 1943. Measures to improve agriculture. Besides construction of a few canals, only 12% of cultivable land was irrigated by 1940. In 1885 a law was passed according to which, if a tenant held a piece of land for 12 years he would enjoy the right to occupy it. Towards the beginning of the 20th century, pressure from the Congress and other leaders for agricultural land reforms led to the establishment of a Department of Agriculture. The Imperial Institute of Agriculture was also set up during the time of Lord Curzon. It provided facilities for advanced training, research and experimental farming. Some agricultural schools and colleges were also set up in different parts of the country. Expansion of transport has often been described as commercial revolution. During colonial period, a significant commercialization of agriculture also took place with the growing of cash crops like jute, cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, etc. Development of transport. The credit of setting up the first railway line in India goes to Lord Dalhousie. The first railway line connecting Bombay to Thane was opened in 1853. The following year Calcutta was linked to the coalfields in Raniganj and Bombay was connected with Kalyan. In 1856, another line was opened to join Madras with Arakonam. Thereafter the development of railways given maximum encouragement and it made brisk progress. Railway lines connected the port cities like Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras with their hinterlands from where the raw materials were transported. However, little attention was paid to link the various parts of the country, which would help in the movement of goods produced within the country, from one part to another. The same policy was also applied to protect the colonial interest in the freight charged. By 1876 about 5,000 miles of railway lines had been laid out connecting all the major centers in India, both by the government and private British companies. By the end of the 19th century over 25,000 kilometers of lines had been laid. Construction of railways also provided employment opportunities to thousands unskilled laborers. The colonial state brought the whole of India under their control. They established uniform law and administration throughout the country. This created political unity in the country. The concepts of regional kingdoms were no more valid. People saw themselves as part of the same country. Transport and communications between different regions helped this process. People traveled, communicated through the postal and telegraph systems, and this helped in setting the networks between the regions. Educational services. The most prominent area where the state had taken initiative was education. By the Charter Act of 1813, the company administration had to accept responsibility for the education of India, and this was the beginning of the state system of education in India under the colonial rule. By 1833, the educational grant, which was 1 lakh rupees under the Charter Act of 1813, had increased to 10 lakhs of rupees per annum. In 1835 the Governor-General William Bentinck had decided to impart Western education in India. In 1844 English became the official language, and it was declared that people having the knowledge of English would be preferred for public employment. In 1854 the colonial state declared its intentions of creating a properly articulated system of education from the primary school to the university, through the dispatch sent by Sir Charles Wood, President of Board of Control. Until 1854, the colonial state did not accept the direct responsibility for the education of the masses, and its educational policy was influenced by what is known as the downward filtration theory. According to this, the company was expected to give a good education to only a few persons, and they were in turn expected to educate the masses. The Crown Rule, which began after 1857, professed the welfare of masses as the goal of colonial state. The All India expenditure on education increased 10 times by 1932-33 as compared to 1882-83. It laid the foundation on which the education system of India subsequently developed. As a result of these measures, there was an increase in the number of schools and colleges run by the state, missionaries, and other private organizations. State control over education also increased. The growth of education was not, however, uniform at all levels, and more attention was given to the expansion of high schools and colleges. Primary schools were inadequate. As a result, vast masses of the country continued to remain illiterate. During colonial period, few notable exceptions such as Jagannath Sankar Seth and D.K. Karve advocated vernacular language as the medium of instruction. G.K. Gokhale sponsored a bill in the Central Assembly in 1913 for providing mass education through compulsory primary education. Even though Gokhale's attempt to promote compulsory education failed, a substantial expansion of primary education took place between 1921 to 47, after the colonial state transferred education to Indians, first under the system of Diaki and later under the constitutional reform of 1935, which ushered in a new era of popularly elected government in the provinces. It is interesting to note that most of the Indian leaders accepted the model of education as evolved by the colonial state. They saw in Western education a panacea for all the ills of Indian society and promoted it widespread with great zeal and organization. There were also sectarian demands for the provision of special education facilities by the state to the neglected or disadvantaged groups. Special measures were adopted to promote education among Muslims, Harijan, and other backward classes and among tribal population. The education of women, which had been long neglected by Indian society, also received special attention. A new program of adult education was also introduced during this period with a view to eradicate illiteracy among the masses. Even in contemporary India, social work professionals take due interest in promoting education for all sections of society irrespective of any discrimination. Health services. Earlier health service under state auspices was not widespread. Colonial rule made efforts in providing medical care. In 1664 hospitals were opened by the East India Company for its servants. By the end of the 18th century a hospital was opened for Indians in Calcutta. Around the years 1800, hospitals were started for Indians in Bombay and Madras, and by 1840 there were about a dozen hospitals for Indians in various large towns besides the presidencies. These limited efforts by the state in providing medical services to the native population was supplemented by the medical service provided by the Christian missionaries, especially for the needy and population in the interior towns. Even in the present scenario, social work professionals try to provide preventive and promotive health care services to the needy and deserving population. During the colonial period, the first medical college was established in 1835 in Calcutta, and soon after medical colleges were established in Bombay and Madras. The colonial state appointed the sanitation commissioners in 1880 in the 5 British provinces of Bengal, Madras, Bombay, Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. This heralded an era of active state role in promoting public health. It was followed by the appointment of the Plague Commission after the outbreak of plague in 1896, which took a heavy toll of life. The Commission, in its report submitted in 1904, recommended the strengthening of the public health services and establishment of laboratories for research and for the preparation of vaccines and sera. The state took prompt action on these recommendations. There was a gradual expansion and strengthening of the medical and public health services in the country. In India, the Bhore Committee, 1945, was appointed to conduct a health survey and development in the entire medical field. This committee recommended the introduction of hospital social worker, and the first trained social worker was appointed at the J.J. Hospital, Bombay in 1946. Medial social work courses were first started in India in 1946, at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences with the able direction of Dr. Miss G.R. Banerjee. Industrial expansion, labor welfare. The second half of the 19th century witnessed the growth of a few modern industries in India. These industries were of two types: plantation industries and machine industries. This led to the growth of cities and employment of laborers in large numbers in industries. Because of widespread rural poverty, people were driven to these cities to seek employment. Living and working conditions of laborers in industries were horrible. In response to this situation, labor legislations came in the wake of modern industrial development, commencing with the Apprentices Act 1850, the Fatal Accidents Act 1853, the Merchant Shipping Act 1859, the Workmen's Breach of Contract Act 1859, and until the passing of the first Factory Act 1881, a series of labor legislation was passed by the government, which were mainly aimed at regulation of employment rather than of the improving conditions of labor. Due to the pressure from textile mill owners in England, the central government appointed a factory commission in 1890, and based on the recommendations of this committee, the Indian Factory Act was passed in 1891. This act was generally on the lines of the earlier Bombay Act. The Factory Act was amended in 1912, 1923 and 1934. Some of the major legislative measures enacted by the colonial state in response to various pressures and the gradual transfer of power to the Indians at the provincial levels are the Workmen's Compensation Act of 1923, a series of provincial maternity benefit acts passed between 1929 to 40, the Payment of Wages Act of 1936 and the Bombay Industrial Disputes Act of 1938. In this type of social legislation, considerations of economic justice and the welfare of the workers play a vital role. Social work profession appreciates sagacity of colonial states' intervention in labor welfare matters. Through legislation and administration, it has facilitated the growth of social welfare. Every economic activity, including agriculture, is now guided by some system governing the number of days of work, hours of work, rest, etc. These were earlier decided at the discretion of the employers, but are now influenced by labor legislation and standard norms under the Code of Industrial Conduct. Initiatives towards social welfare. During the second and third decades of the 20th century, through a series of legislation, the colonial state initiated programs for the control of certain social problems like beggary, crime and juvenile delinquency in the metropolitan cities of Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. It can be noticed that these were the services with which the government was familiar, as they had been in operation for some time. In England, where, much earlier, similar problems had been faced in the process of industrialization, social defense was the state intervention that first began in India. The history of prison reform movement in India can be traced to some of the committees under the British administration during 19th century. Nowadays, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are working in the prison for the welfare of the inmates. During colonial period, among the earliest measures were the provision for the employment of orphans and destitute by the Apprentices Act of 1850, and Reformatory Schools Act of 1870. Madras was the first province to pass the Children's Act in 1920, and was soon followed by Bengal and Bombay. Legislation for the control, prevention and treatment of beggary was passed in 1945 by the governments of Bombay and Madras. Suppression of immoral traffic was also attempted by a few provinces like Bombay, Bengal and Bihar. In the field of social reform, many historic measures were taken, a series of measures of social legislation enacted by the state during 1828 to 56. These included the abolition of sati by William Bentinck in 1829, the abolition of slavery in 1843, the abolition of female infanticide and human sacrifice in 1802, and the passing of the Widow Remarriage Act in 1856, which was the last major piece of social legislation for a long time. The only major piece of social legislation to be passed during the later half of the 19th century was the Age of Consent Act in 1891. Though it was the zeal of Indian social reformers, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandar Vidyasagar, Madhav Govind Ranade, Ramakrishna Bhandarkar and others, that created an atmosphere which made implementation of such legislation possible, but the credit of passing these acts goes to the colonial state. This type of regulation can be considered a legislative triumph in the field of social justice. It is interesting to note that modern social work in India introduced by the Christian Missionaries at the beginning of the 19th century. The regenerative forces into action were first brought by the Christian missionaries through their religious preaching and attacks on native religious practices such as idol worship, caste system, sati etc. and by their educational activities and social work. The introduction of the printing press, the launching of journals in English and Bengali, the translation of the Bible and other religious books into Bengali and later in other Indian languages, led to the beginning of a process of social change, which is frequently labeled as the Renaissance. Further, the orphan children and destitute men and women were kept in the boarding houses run by the Christian missionaries. Soon, this example was followed by some of the Indian social reformers like Sasipada Banerjee, Jyotirav Govindrav Phule, Pandita Ramabai, D.K. Karve, Kandukudi, Veerasalingam and others who started widow homes in different parts of the country. During the last quarter of the century, Augustinians like Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj, and Ramakrishna Mission began to provide a variety of welfare services for famine-stricken destitute, orphans and widows. By the 20th century, many sectarians, religious or caste associations in different corners of the country began to provide similar institutional welfare services. The establishment of the Sir Dorabji Tata Graduate School of Social Work, now known as Tata Institute of Social Sciences, by Christian missionaries with financial help of the House of Tata, in 1936, provided an evidence of the new social awareness and a vehicle for translating new ideas into action. 1.4 Initiatives BYCENTRALAND State governments. After independence, the post-independence era witnessed a major shift in ideologies, concepts and approaches in social work profession. Here, emphasis was given to link the social work profession with the present need and challenges. With the expansion of the welfare activities, economy, service sectors, the field of social work practice also became wider to cater to all the spheres. Now we will discuss in this chapter how the concept, approach and practice of social work being translated and developed along with the development of the nation in terms of expansion of welfare services through both state and central government initiatives in the field of labor welfare. After independence, the states began relating their social responsibilities towards the weaker sections of the society. The Government of India took an important step for the welfare of the labor by enacting Factories Act, 1948. Sec. 85 of the Act empowers all the states to extend all or any provisions of the Act to any premise. The provisions include health, safety, welfare, employment of young persons and children, hours of work for adult and child worker, holidays, leave with wages. The Royal Commission on Labour in 1831 recommended for appointment of labour officer with all the attributes matches with a social worker, but for the first time appointment of a welfare officer became a statute under the Factory Act. 1948. Subsequently, in the Plantations Labour Act. 1951 and in the Mines Act. 1952 provisions were made for appointment of a welfare officer wherein 300 or more and 500 and more workers were employed respectively. In all the three legislations, the qualification for the same was a degree in social science, social work or labor welfare. It was an important landmark where a professional social worker was given due recognition of in the field of labor welfare. Embodying the directive principles, it is stated in this chapter that the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by security and protecting as effectively as possible a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political, shall inform all the institutions of natural life. All the 5-year plans have witnessed welfare and development initiatives for the huge labor force. In the first 5-year plan, 1951 to 1956, welfare of laborers by extension of welfare facilities was given due attention. The Plantations Labour Act, 1951, the Mines Act, 1952, the Employees Provident Fund Act, 1952, were enacted during this period. At the same time, the state governments enacted various laws related to housing facilities for the laborer. The Bombay Housing Board Act, 1948 was A milestone in this movement. The second five-year plan, 1956-61, focused on better working conditions. Few enactments were brought in the motor transport field of housing by state government. Motor transport workers and seamen were also covered in new legislations during this period. In 1961, dock workers' safety, health and welfare were drawn up as a comprehensive scheme. During this period, various state governments took initiatives at different levels. The government of Assam enacted the Assam Plantations Employees Welfare Fund Act. In 1959, a new plantation labor housing scheme was launched in April 1954 to provide certain amount of loan to the workers for construction of their houses. Effective implementation of various statutory welfare provisions was given importance during the third five-year plan, 1961-66. It spoke about the improvement of working conditions. Maternity Benefit Act, 1961, Apprentice Act, 1961, Iron Ore Mines Labor Welfare Cess Act, 1961 and the Payment of Bonus Act, 1965. Were few initiatives taken by the central government during this period. In the fourth five-year plan, 1969-74, the Employees State Insurance Scheme covered shops and commercial establishment. It provided medical facilities to the family of insured persons. Economic benefit for the laborers was given prime importance. Many of the attempts in this line were enactment of the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act, 1970, the Payment of Gratuity Act, 1972, Employees Family Pension Scheme, 1971 were passed. The plan directed all the state government to provide welfare centers, holiday homes, and recreational centers. It also stressed on effective enforcement of labor laws. The fifth five-year plan, 1974-79, stressed on setting up safety cells in various states for promoting industrial safety. Equal Remuneration Act, 1976 and the Interstate Migrant Workmen Regulation of Employment and Conditions of Service Act, 1979 were the important legislations enacted in this time. The sixth five-year plan, 1980-85, focused on effective implementation of legislative measures. The state governments were advised to provide benefit to agricultural laborer, artisans, handloom weavers, fishermen, leather workers and other unorganized workers in rural and urban areas. The seventh plan, 1985-1990, laid emphasis on improvement of working and living conditions of the worker in unorganized sector both in rural and urban areas. This was the time when government realizes the importance of education and awareness on programs and legal aid for the workers and consequently made provisions in that line. As regards to child labor, Planning Commission advocated for better working condition of child labor and their social acceptance. For the first time, welfare of women laborer was thought of during this plan. The plan laid down certain major tasks for women laborer. They are 1. To treat them as specific target groups in all rural development programs. 2. To ensure that in all asset endowment programs, women have rights over assets and resources. 3. To properly diversify vocational training facilities for women to suit their varied needs and skills. 4. To encourage appropriate technologies. 5. To establish marketing estates at the state level. 6. To increase women's participation in trade. 7. To increase women's participation in trade unions and in decision making. And 8. To improve and enlarge the scope of the existing legislation for women worker. It witnessed the major shift in empowerment from development, rehabilitation of bonded labor, welfare of women and children workers. Education was stressed in 8 five-year plan, 1992-97. It stressed on the importance of industrial relations in a healthy working condition. It also encouraged workers' participation in management. After a long struggle, building and construction Workers' Welfare Cess Act, 1996 was passed during this period. The ninth five-year plan, 1997-2002, emphasized on strong enforcement of labor laws. The special feature was setting up national employment exchanges to register the job seekers. Here registration of some special groups of job seekers, like physically handicapped, along with demand for labor in specific industries like coal mines and the plantations were the special attempts made for the first time. To improve the skills and productivity, new vocational training institutions were established and many of industrial units were promoted for imparting apprentice training. In the 10th Five-Year Plan, 2002 to 2007, efforts were taken to increase the coverage of labor market institutions. The essential condition for this was realized as making provisions of gainful employment to entire labor force. The emphasis on vocational training and skill building of laborers was the main focus in the plan. In the 11th Five-Year Plan, 2007 to 2012, for the first time, women were recognized not just as equal citizens but as agent of economic and social growth. The gender perspective incorporated in the plan was the outcome of extensive consultations with different stakeholders, including a group of feminist economists. The plan adopted participatory approach to gender equity was based on the recognition that intervention in favor of women must be multi-pronged and they must I. Provide women with basic entitlements, e. Address the reality of globalization and its impact on women by prioritizing economic empowerment, e. Ensure an environment free from all forms of violence against women, VAW, physical, economic, social, psychological etc. IV. Ensure the participation and adequate representation of women at the highest policy levels, particularly in parliament and state assemblies, and we strengthen existing institutional mechanism and create new ones for gender mainstreaming and effective policy implementation. The 12th Five-Year Plan, 2012 to 2017, is committed to ending gender-based inequities, discrimination, violence against girls and women, including improvement in the adverse and steeply declining child sex ratio. The 12th Plan will endeavor to provide nurturing, protective and safe environment for women to facilitate their entry into public spaces. Similarly, it identified varied key strategies for women's agency to bring out the crucial challenges posed by the traditional determinants of women's agency and empowerment, such as asset ownership, skill development, financial inclusion, along with new and emerging challenges posed by urbanization, climate change, energy insecurity, the role of the media and so on. Specific initiatives for empowering women and engendering development in the 12th Plan have been outlined. Many central trade union organizations like INTUCT, 1947, HMS, 1948, UTUC, 1994, BMS, 1955, C2, 1970, and NLO, 1969, emerged and helped the growth of labor welfare movement. Initiatives in the field of tribal welfare. Integrating tribal people into mainstream was, though extremely complex, became the major focus of the government after independence. The preservation of their rich cultural and social heritage was at the heart of the government policy and planning after independence. Nehru tried to shape government's attitude towards the tribal people, that they are significant part of Indian population and they have equal rights to be prospered. There were two basic parameters of the Nehruvian approach. The tribal areas have to progress and they have to progress on their own way. There should not be any imposition on them. Nobody should approach them with superiority and they should be recognized for their equal contribution in evolution of the common culture, social and political life of the country. It was a landmark period where the uniqueness of tribal people with their cultural and languages was recognized. They were given chance to work out their needs for their growth and progress. It clearly reflects the paraphrasing of social work approaches in the area of tribal welfare. To make India into a welfare state and shaping its policy suited to support the objectives of the nation, the foundation stone was put in the Indian Constitution itself. It provides equality before every front, reservation in the education, service sector and in the political sphere as positive discrimination to mainstream them in the society. It is directed under Article 46 that the state should promote with special care the educational and economic interest of the tribal people and should protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation through special Legislation. Following this, the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes, Prevention of Atrocities Act, 1989 was enacted. To support this act, the central government enacted rules as the Scheduled Castes and the Scheduled Tribes, Prevention of Atrocities Rules, 1995. Under this act, the governors of the states in which tribal areas were situated were given special responsibilities to protect their interests. Also, they were given power to modify state and central laws in their application as to suit the tribal life and to frame operational regulations for the protection of their rights on land and from moneylenders. Appointment of a special officer was talked in the rules. The duties specified for the special officer are 1. Providing immediate relief and other facilities to the victims of atrocity and initiate necessary measures to prevent or avoid reoccurrence of atrocity. 2. Setting up an awareness center and organizing workshop in the identified areas or at the district headquarters, to educate the persons belonging to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes about their rights and protection available to them under the provisions of various central and state enactments or rules and schemes, etc., framed therein, coordinating with the non-governmental organization and providing necessary facilities and financial and other type of assistance to non-governmental organizations for maintaining center or organizing workshops. There is nowhere maintained that the special officer can be a professional social worker, but certainly opens a scope for the professional social worker in the field of tribal welfare. As stated, the preventative, curative and rehabilitative activities of the special officer requires working knowledge on tribal life, their culture, needs, their legal rights, knowledge on networking with concerned organization, counseling and referral services, etc. These are moreover the attributes of a professional social workers who are trained to maintain these responsibilities. This shows the need and recognition of the approaches of the trained social workers in the field. The 5th and 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution deals on the administration in both on scheduled and non-scheduled states for their welfare and development. It speaks about setting of tribal advisory councils to advise on matters concerning the welfare of tribal. It seems the strengthening of social welfare administration was the sole objective of 5th and 6th schedule. In all the 5-year plans, focus and major allocation was given to the concerned departments for the welfare of the tribal population. The central and the state governments created special facilities and organized special programs for the development of the tribal areas and the tribal people. The funding for tribal welfare significantly increased after 1971. The importance attached to tribal development is also reflected in the 20 points programs in 1986. The following points relate to their welfare and the welfare ministry was concerned mainly for them are providing justice, facilities of basic amenities like water, housing, access to firewood and forest produce, protection of federal rights. The Tribal Sub-Plan, TSP, concept evolved and implemented during first 5-year plan period continues to be the main instrument for development of tribal people in the tribal areas. The Special Central Assistance, SCA, was initiated during the beginning of 5th plan as social assistance to these special categories of people for their further development. The purpose of the SCA was that it should be catalyst state governments and financial institution. It was the joint venture of both state and central governments on 50:50 basis. Initiatives in the field of rural development. The post-independence era has seen many central and state initiatives combined with voluntary efforts in the field of rural development. The Nilokhir project got operational in 1948 as the Refugee Rehabilitation Project. Under this project, vocational training cum production centers were started to give training and employment opportunities to the refugees. A new township Mazdoor Manzil was created with all facilities like hospitals, schools, vocational and technical institutions for training, agricultural extension and veterinary services and recreational facilities. Cooperatives were established. The school provided education on agriculture, animal husbandry and about the local craft. In 1952, Firkha Development Scheme consisted of more than 250 villages in Madras province. The chief minister was The project chief. The major achievement of the scheme was the building of infrastructure facilities and the initiation of people's participation. In 1948, Itawa project was launched by the government of Uttar Pradesh. The project achievement was quite significant in terms of providing infrastructure facilities, like educational institutions, cooperative societies like educational institutions, unions and seed stores, provision for increased irrigation facilities and provision for public health and other amenities in the villages. The project was finally visualized as an extension program which emphasizes local level planning, teamwork, communication and constant follow-up to respond to the local needs. After independence, the Community Development Projects, CDP, was started. With the positive influence of Itawa pilot project on a national scale for developing rural communities. The CDP was conceived as an instrument to transform the socio-economic life of the village community. Nehru appreciated the CDP as they seemed to build up the community and the individual and make the better the builder of his own village center and of India in the larger sense. It indicated that the CDP has able to create amongst the people oneness towards their community and their willing participation for their own development. This proves the community organization as the method of social work rooted in all the community development projects. It was launched in 1952 with the objectives of 1. Securing total development of the material and human resources in rural areas, 2. Developing local leadership and self-governing institutions, 3. Raising living standards of rural people by means of rapid increase in food and agricultural produce and, 4. Ensuring a change in mental outlook of the people, installing them in ambition for higher standards. The CDP was administered at 5 levels: national, state, district, block and village. The village was taken as the unit of operation and the block was the development unit where BDO was the chief officer to assist 10 villages level workers, VLW, who are responsible for looking after L0 villages and 7 extension officers dealing with different fields: agriculture, rural engineering, animal husbanding, rural industry, education, panchayats and cooperative. In the district level the district collector, in the state level development commissioner and in national level the Prime Minister as the chairperson responsible for CDP. There was a separate wing at the national level known as Community Project Administration, CPA. The National Extension Service, NES, was launched 1953 and the developmental work proceeded on the basis of self-help. After 3 years, the blocks covered under NES were converted into CDP block with some financial coverage. In 1957, the Ministry of Community Development was formed on recommendation of the Grow More Food Inquiry Committee, GMFIC. In the 1960s, the approach to the rural development led to the introduction of Intensive Agricultural Development Program, IADP, launched in 1964, Intensive Agricultural Area Program, IAAP, and the High Yielding Varieties Program. These programs finally led to the Green Revolution in India. Consequently, special programs like Drought Prone Area Program, 1976, Cash Scheme for Rural Employment, 1971, Tribal Area Development, 1972, Minimum Need Program, 1975, Small Farmers Development Agency, SFDA, and Marginal Farmers and Agricultural Laborers Development Agency, MFAL, in 1971 were introduced. In OCT 1974, the Department of Rural Development came into existence as a part of Ministry of Food and Agriculture. In August 1979, the Department of Rural Development was elevated to the status of a new Ministry of Rural Reconstruction. That ministry was renamed as Ministry of Rural Development in Jan. 1982. The Ministry Rural Development was renamed in as Ministry of Rural Areas and Employment in 1995, and in 1999 it became Ministry of Rural Areas and Employment. The ministry is responsible for implementing programs for poverty alleviation, employment generation, infrastructure development and social security. The sixth plan, 1980-85, undertook poverty eradication as prime objective N. Consequently, programs like National Rural Employment Program, Rural Landless Employment Generation Program, later merged into Jawahar Rojgar Yojana, training of youth for self-employment, development of women and children in rural area and integrated rural development program were implemented by the concerned ministry. During the 9th plan period, the anti-poverty programs have been restructured to enhance the sufficiency of the programs for providing increased benefits to the rural poor. In 2002, Swajaldhara, and in 2003, Hariyali, as new initiatives launched to make the drinking water reach to every doorsteps and to implement watershed development programs respectively. In both the scheme, involvement of Panchayati Raj institutions was stacked. Bringing women into mainstream of development was a major concern for the government. Therefore, the programs of poverty alleviation have a women's component to ensure flow of adequate funds to this section. Under 73rd Amendment, Act. 1992, the Constitution has placed enormous responsibility on the panchayats to formulate and execute various programs of economic development and social justice. A number of centrally sponsored schemes are being implemented through panchayats. It has given new dimensions in the field of Panchayati Raj in terms of decentralization and devolution of powers to the making it a three-tier system and the bottom-to-top working approach, i.e., need-based planning at the grassroots level by the people themselves and then going to the top level. This replaced older theory and practice of trickle-down approach. The Ministry of Rural Development provide financial assistance to state governments and UTs for capacity building of women elected members in Panchayati Raj institutions, The need-based approach in the development programs, facilitating people's participation in their welfare, helping them to identify and prioritize their needs by themselves, mainstreaming the underprivileged in decision-making, and providing people-friendly administration for their welfare are the main features of the Panchayati Raj system. It reflects that it works in line with the community organization, community development and social welfare administration of the modern social work practice. The ministry has 3 departments such as L. Department of Rural Development, 2. Department of Land Resources and 3. Department of Drinking Water Supply. At present, the important program being implemented by the Department of Rural Development are Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Swarnajayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana, launched in 1999, Sampurna Gramin Rojgar Yojana, launched in 2001, DRDA administration, introduced in 1999, training schemes, Nirdes. Pioneer in imparting related training, promotion of voluntary scheme and social action programs, organization of beneficiaries, advancement and dissemination of rural technology through CAP art and monitoring mechanism, the and DRD as a given responsibility. The major programs of Department of Land Resources are 1. Drought-prone area program, DPAP, 2. The Desert Development Program, DDP, 3. Integrated Wasteland Development Program, IWDP, and 4. Land Reforms, LR. These aim at increasing the soil and moisture conservation and productivity of the wasteland of the degraded lands, thereby increase the income of the people. The major programs of the drinking water supply department are the Swajaldhara, the Accelerated Rural Water Supply Program, ARWSP, and the Total Sanitation Program, TSP. Recognizing health as an important contributory factor in the utilization of manpower and the uplifting of the economic condition of the country, the Planning Commission gave considerable importance to health programs in the 5-year plans. In the 5-year plans, the focus was given in the following programs: 1. Control or eradication of major communicable disease, or strengthening of basic health services through establishing of primary health centers and sub-centers. 2. Population control. 3. Development of manpower resources for health services. The health schemes in India at the national level consist of 1. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, 2. Directorate General Health Services, and 3. The Central Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Under the Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare there are two departments, i.e., Department of Health and Department of Family Welfare, created in 1964. The Directorate General of Health Services works as the principal advisor to the Union Ministry in both medical and public health matters. The Central Council of Health was set up by a presidential order in 1952 under Article 243 of the Constitution. It promotes coordinated and concerted action between the center and the state in implementation of all the programs and measures pertaining to the health of the nation. In the state level, the apex body in health system are 1. State Ministry of Health and 2. State Health Directorate, the establishment which varies on states to states. In Bengal it was created in 1947 and Maharashtra it was created in 1970. Gradually, in the medical and psychiatric field the need of a social worker in the health setting was realized. In rehabilitation, social welfare departments and many other departments. In leading hospitals and later, in many other hospitals, appointments of social workers were made to support the health social work part. The psychiatric social workers are of special demand in the psychiatric field as the attributes, approaches and training of the social workers are recognized all over India. In a nutshell, we see closely in the development of health systems and families. In India, a good social welfare administration was given prime importance. Besides curative services, the preventive services were focused in every activities. Close supervision in terms of home visits and required referral services were being advocated in every program. The health initiatives, however, followed the basic discussed approaches to reach to the well-being which directly resembles with of today's social work practice. We can conclude that the professional social work which we talk presently has been rooted in all the welfare approaches in our country. Initiatives in the field of child welfare. The concept of child welfare services has changed with the changing concept of social work. All children are special and hence need help for their growth and development has been a recent phenomenon. In the post-independent India, the term child welfare has assumed a broader meaning. It is not only concerned with the care of maladjusted, destitute and delinquents, but incorporates the social, economic and health services of both government and voluntary agencies, which secure and protect the welfare of all the children in their physical, emotional and intellectual development. Of late, child rights, child protection and care have been one of the prime concerns for the government and non-government organizations. Every district of the country is appointing child protection officer with counselors reporting to the Juvenile Justice Board of the judicial wings of the district. Vocational courses on child development, child protection and child rights are being introduced and offered at the undergraduate and postgraduate level in most of the social work institutes considering the requirements of the districts across the country. 1. Constitutional provisions. Article 15 says the state may make any special provision for women and children and cannot discriminate against any citizen on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth or any of them. Under Article 24, it is mentioned that no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine or engaged in any hazardous employment. Article 39 of Directive Principle of State Policy speaks that the health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused and that citizens are not forced by economic necessity to enter vocations unsuited to their age or strength and that children are given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity and that childhood and youth are protected against exploitation and against moral and material abandonment. Article 45 says about the provision for free and compulsory education for all the children until they complete the age of 14 years, and Article 47 states that it is the duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health, enforcing for equality, justice, security, protection and care of children in the constitutional provisions. The government promotes the all-round growth and development of all the children. The Juvenile Justice Act, 2000 covers any person below 18 years as child. 2. Child education. Child education being assisted by Central Social Welfare Board, CSWB. Voluntary. Agencies took active role in the field of pre-primary education after independence. There were about 5,000 Balwadis in 1961. Setting up Balwadis was a part of community development programs in rural areas. The Education Commission Report, 1966, says that there were only 3,500 pre-primary schools with 6,500 teachers at that time. The CSWB and Community Development Administration organized 20,000 Balwadis in rural areas with an enrollment of 6,000,000 children. In 1965 the primary education was extended and there were 37 million children in lower primary stage and 13 million in the higher primary stage. Under the third five-year plan, 6 training centers were set up for Bal Sevikas, the trained child welfare workers, working in rural areas. Through the Constitution says for free and compulsory education for the children. Up to the age of 14 years, it found many practical difficulties in implementation in the initial years. In the second five-year plan, it was realized to provide basic facilities for the education of all children in the age groups of 6 to 11 years. In the fourth and fifth five-year plan, the entire age group of 11 to 14 years was followed by extension education, but still found difficulties in bringing girls to school in sufficient numbers, high dropout of children as soon as they are able to contribute to family income etc. Gradually, special institutions were established in different parts of country to cater to children's need for special care. Kanyashrams, hostel facilities for girl students, stipend for children of marginalized families, accommodating and special allowances to women teachers, appointment of trained and qualified teachers, improvement in the teaching, providing holidays to coincide with harvesting and sowing seasons were the initiatives taken by the state and central governments. It is seen that the need-based approach was gradually adopted in the field of child education to get success. 3. Child heat. The Planning Commission in the first five-year plan recommended to open adequate number of properly equipped maternity and child welfare centers. Numbers of public health centers were established in rural areas. The numbers of maternity beds were increased to double its strength in order to accommodate more delivery cases and to give postnatal care for a long period. The postnatal clinics will become an essential feature of all hospitals. In the rural areas in each community development blocks, maternity and child health centers were opened as part of primary and secondary health unit centers. GOFT launched DWCRA, development of women and children in rural areas, and other many child development schemes based on health, immunization and nutrition for the development of children. Now in rural areas, Anganwadi workers under ICDS projects are engaged in providing direct or indirect health services for prenatal and postnatal care. In the urban area, school health services gain momentum. Mainly the municipal and corporations in towns and cities made attempt to conduct annual physical examination of children. The third five-year plan suggested to provide clean drinking water and sanitation facilities in schools, arrangement of medical inspection, instruction to teachers in health education, addressing the root cause and helping for once. Welfare is the working strategy of social workers and is even seen in the child health services being provided by the center and state. Initiatives in the field of youth welfare. Youth welfare has assumed importance in recent years since independence. Both the Union Ministry of Education and Departments of Education and Social Welfare at the state level have shown their concern. They focused on promoting youth leadership, sports, training camps, student study tours and non-students youth club and centers. To integrate physical education at school level, the Union Ministry launched an integrated program named National Fitness Corps. This includes physical education, National Discipline Scheme and Auxiliary Cadet Corps. The high schools and middle schools were covered under this program during fourth five-year plan. The neglected rural youth were covered under the community development movement, which aimed at altering the social scheme in the villages. The youth Clubs started meeting educational and social needs. The rural higher institutes started benefiting the young people from villages who wished to take rural services as a career. The Central Social Welfare Board and a voluntary organization, the Kasturba Gandhi Memorial Trust, took lead role in welfare of young women and girls. The Young Women's Christian Association started running hostels for working girls. The Young Men's Christian Association and many other associations provide opportunities for games, recreation and social activities. The All India Sports Council extended its services for the youth. Youth festivals were organized to bring about social contacts and understanding. It is seen that the social work principles and approaches in terms of believing on people's capacity, building their skills, promoting their leadership, helping them to realize their potential, confidence building and facilitating them to work actively for their well-being were transparent in all the youth welfare programs. Initiative by Ministry of Rehabilitation to assist a large number of victims of partition and migrants from Pakistan. In 1947, the Ministry of Rehabilitation was set up. The purpose was to rehabilitate them physically, socially, and economically. The ministry gradually worked in the direction of providing livelihood options by means of economic assistance, housing, and education facilities. Also, an important scheme was implemented to rehabilitate refugees from East Pakistan in the bordering states of Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, and Andhra Pradesh. In the initial years, the education and related matters of the children of victims were dealt by the ministry, but later on it was shifted to the Education Ministry. Initiatives by Ministry of Education. Financial assistance was given by Ministry of Education to promote and establishment of schools of social work at different places. The ministry also has established a separate section to study and develop the social education methods. It promotes different scholarship to the students of social work, including other developments for research and higher studies. The ministry also took special responsibility of strengthening and promoting education of blind. It promotes researchers, development of special literature of Braille, publication of special literature and Braille etc. For the benefit of the visually challenged. Initiatives by Ministry of Human Resource Development, MHRD. The social work principles signify building of people's capacity for their welfare and are to be taken as valuable resources in the society. Thus, efforts should be taken for their all-round development. Our country too realized the integrated development of its citizen, beginning with childhood and going right through their life. In pursuance to find out instruments and agencies contributing to a responsible for this growth to ensure all-round development, a new ministry was created as Ministry of HRD, Human Resource Development, on the 26th of September 1985, through 174th Amendment to the Government of India. Allocation of Business Rules 1961. Currently the ministry has two departments, namely, I. Department of School Education and Literacy, and 2. Department of Higher Education. Under the Department of School Education and Literacy, the important features of the commendable work the ministry are Sarva Siksha Abhiyana, promoting girls' education, establishing Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, Mahila Samakhiya scheme, midday meal scheme, strengthening teachers' education, right to education BILL 2005 and Jan Samkhya Sthirata Kosh. For improvement in secondary education, National Council of Education Research and Training, NCERT, was established as an apex organization to assist and advise central and state governments on academic matters related to school education. CBSE, Kendriya Vidyalaya Sangathan, Navodaya Vidyalaya, Central Tibetan School Administration, National Institute of Open Schooling, National Foundation for Teachers' Welfare etc. are the important bodies under the Ministry of HRD. Directorate of Adult Education also started working under Ministry of HRD. The main players of higher education system are University Grants Commission, which is responsible for coordination, determination and maintenance of standards and release of grants, and professional councils such as All India Council for Technical Education, AICTE, Distance Education Councils, DEC, Indian Council For Agricultural Research, ICAR, Bar Council of India, BCI, National Council. For Teachers Education, NCETE, Rehabilitation Council of India, RCI, Medical Council of India, AMCI, Pharmacy Council of India, FCI, Indian Nursing Council, Inc., Dentist Council of India, DCI, Central Council of Homeopathy, CCH, and Central Council of Indian Medicine, CCIM.
Presently there are 36 central universities and more than 100 institutions which have been declared as deemed to be universities. The state governments have taken responsibility and opened state universities and colleges. Initiatives by other ministry. After independence, welfare of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, correctional services and prison administration, juvenile delinquency suppression of immoral traffic, programs of aftercare, moral and social hygiene were the responsibilities entrusted to the Ministry of Home Affairs. But now the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment is entrusted with the welfare, social justice and empowerment of disadvantaged and marginalized section of the society with scheduled caste, backward classes, persons with disabilities, aged persons and victims of drug abuse etc. Welfare of women and child welfare were gradually looked after by the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare by Govt. Of India and Ministry of the concerned states. The government faced various practical difficulties in implementing policies and programs and hence started promoting welfare agencies to take over the responsibility of implementing need-based facilities. The government recognized efforts of welfare organization and recognition of trained social workers in the field of social welfare gained momentum. This was the time when the field of social work was vastly enlarged to serve all the section of the population. Central and State Social Welfare Board. The Central Social Welfare Board, CSWB, was established in August 1953, with the objectives to promote social welfare activities and to implement welfare programs for women and children through voluntary organizations. The CSWB is unique in the sense that it was the first organization in post-independence era to achieve people's participation for implementation of welfare programs. Community organization as a method of social work which we advocate today is based on realization of people about their own needs and their confident participation in the welfare activities. The specific programs and activities of CSWB are 1. Giving grants to voluntary organization to conduct condensed courses and provide vocational training to needy people. These activities were started in 1958 and 1975 respectively. 2. Creating awareness among rural and poor women on various social issues. 3. Financial assistance to voluntary organizations to take up variety of income generating activities which was initiated in 1958. 4. Promoting support services like creches and daycare services to children of low-income group families who are working or ailing and establishing working women's hostels. 5. Providing preventive and rehabilitative services to women and children who are victims of family maladjustments and atrocities and establishing of family counseling centers. 6. Mahila Mandal program started in 1961-62. It is a decentralized program being run by the state social welfare boards. 7. Providing nutrition to Balwadi children. 8. Extending services such as pre-primary school education, craft activities for women, maternity services and recreation facilities in rural areas under welfare extension projects. It has set up state social welfare boards at the state level to manage the activities at the state level. Apart from all these, it has supported various economic programs under urban family welfare projects, welfare extension projects, after care programs etc. The CSWB publishes 2 monthly periodicals, Social Welfare and Samaj Kalyan, which were started in 1954 and 1955 respectively. This covers welfare initiatives, stories of human interests, awareness of social issues, etc. All the three services provided by social workers such as preventive, curative and rehabilitative are being attempted to be given under the CSWB for the welfare and development of the marginalized people. Social welfare departments. Setting of welfare departments itself seems the recognition of basic concept of social work, social service and social welfare services, government realized besides the basic immediate facilities, special categories of people, specifically the underprivileged sections, should get special kind of services which will mainstream them in the society. Health and education received prime importance. To expand the constitutional provision of free and compulsory education for the children up to the age of 14 years, schemes and provisions were made. The expansion of medical services were initially managed by Lady Dufferin Fund, but now the state government and the municipal boards have taken responsibility. After independence, the government has taken active responsibilities in providing welfare services to individuals and special groups. Under different departments, the government has now started funding to various welfare agencies to work effectively for their development. To review the programs of social welfare, the Committee on Planned Projects appointed a study team on social welfare with SMT Renuka Ray as its head in 1959. On the recommendation of the committee, a separate division of social welfare was set up in the Ministry of Education. In 1964, Department of Social Security, an independent department, was created to devoting special attention to welfare activities, labor welfare, welfare of backward classes and general social welfare were the main activities of this department. In 1966, Ministry of Labor and Employment took over the responsibility of labor-related matters. Later, the Department of Social Security was redesignated as Department of Social Welfare and started looking after child welfare, women welfare, welfare of physically and mentally handicapped and backward classes. But now there are separate departments to look after the welfare activities independently. State social welfare departments. In the state, the welfare work received a new impetus in the post-independence period. In some cases, the departments, which were working previously, were strengthened, and in some states new welfare departments were established. It differs from state to state. The welfare department in 2 states took over the responsibilities of promoting welfare agencies in the state for implementing welfare activities. In the state of UP, Harijan Welfare Department was set up to see the welfare of Harijans. The Labor Department took up the responsibility of the labor welfare activities in the states. For smooth implementation of community development activities in rural areas, the Development Commissioner for Community Development were appointed in many states. The Department of Prisons took over the responsibility of correctional services and probation activities. Shift in ideologies. In 1964, Ms. Yasas made efforts to apply Gandhian philosophies to social work. In the same year, a working group entitled Concepts, Contents and Approaches of Professional Social Work and Gandhian Constructive Work was appointed by Gandhian Institute of Studies in order to evolve an integrated ideology of social work in India. In this exercise, professional social workers realized that social work should not confine itself to ameliorative work, but should aim towards social action to fight the roots of social malaise and to change the social order. It was countered by the UGC-sponsored first review of social work education in Indian Union in 1965. They published the first review report in social work education, which was welfare-oriented. Association of Schools of Social Work in India, ASSW, organized a seminar in 1966 on the role of social work profession in social reconstruction. The seminar finally suggested a shift in emphasis of social work education from a remedial, rehabilitative approach to a preventive developmental approach. The second review report on social work education published in 1980 was development-oriented. It strongly differentiated the need of social work in India and the West. According to the report, ours is an imperial one but based on the Indian values and tradition. The report pointed out that the major problem in India is to assist the greater part of the population and not a tangential group. It suggested on the global need to emphasize the teaching of social action, social policy and social administration. Emphasizing social action is an important method to be practiced in India. 3. Major works came up during the 80s, i.e., Social Work and Social Action, Siddiqui. 1984, Social Action Through Law, Gandhi, 1985, and a chapter on social action. In the Encyclopedia of Social Work in India, Dasgupta, 1987, the scope of social work practice was in debate in 1980. Thus, the ideologies of Indian professional social work seem to have developed as a combination of modern professional values, values from Indian religion and social ideologies and values of Gandhian Sarvodaya movement. Social work education. Initially, the concept of social work was meant to helping the economically dependent persons. The definitions given by various social scientists prove this fact. For the first time in 1947, the then Premier of Bombay Shri B.G. Khair in the All India Conference of Social Work remarked that the aim of social work, as generally understood, is to remove social injustice, to relieve distress, to prevent suffering of society, to rehabilitate themselves and their families and, in short, to fight against the 5 giants: 1. Physical want, 2. Disease, 3. Ignorance, 4. Squalor, and 5. Idleness. Professor Sushil Chandra says, social work is a dynamic activity undertaken by public or private effort in the implementation of social policy, with a view to raise the standard of living and to bring about social, economic, and cultural well-being of the individual, family and grow within a society irrespective of its stage of social development. The first professional institution, the present Tata Institute of Social Sciences by Christian missionaries with financial help from the House of Tatas to provide training for a career in social work, was established in 1936 in Bombay. After independence, Kashi Vidyapeeth, Varanasi and College of Social Service, Gujarat Vidyapeeth, Ahmedabad were established in 1947. In 1948, Delhi School of Social Work, DSSW, came under auspices of North YWCA of India with assistance from Foreign Division of American YWCA. It is the pioneer institution offering 2 years postgraduate course leading to master's degree. In 1947, University of Delhi granted affiliation to Delhi School of Social Work and took up management of school in 1961. The first school as part of the Department of Social Work, Lucknow University, was established in 1949. Madras School of Social Work was established in 1952. The Matruseva Sun Institute of Social Work, Nagpur, was established in 1958. At present, more than 100 institutions offer bachelor's and master's degree, and some others offer certificate course in social work. Some colleges offer PhD programs. The state of Maharashtra itself has more than 60 colleges, which provide social work education. The University Grants Commissions appointed the first review committee for social work education in 1960 and the second review committee in 1975 for the promotion, maintenance of standards of education, coordination of social work education, training, research and practice. The important recommendation of the Review Committee was to establish National Council in Social Work Education for the promotion and development of social work education in India. The third Review Committee in 2001 spoke the need of relating social work education to the social realities. It recommended the curriculum to be divided in 3 sets. These are 1. Core set includes the philosophy, ideology, values, ethics, theory and concepts. 2. The supportive set deals with knowledge and skills to assist the core set. 3. The interdisciplinary set includes theories, concepts from other disciplines, which relates with social work according the student's choice. IGNOU as a national university became pioneer in providing distance education in bachelor degree in social work since 2004. It has developed a curriculum which includes both contact class and field work. It has also provided some level of flexibility suited to the students who are even working on full-time basis. The syllabus is developed in consultation with the universities and organization practicing social work in field. 1.5 Summary. In this unit we have attempted to learn that welfare has been the way of life in Indian society. We find instances of welfare administration before the invasions of Aryans. The duties of the king and people were part of set rules. We collected the welfare initiatives of the state like poor relief, protecting families and dependents, sound administrative policies, strict jurisdiction and developmental activities accomplished by the rulers of India. The colonial state had introduced a new pattern of thinking based on rational thinking, democracy and liberalism. The colonial state had extended their activities and outlook to the education of masses, the care of the sick and the feeble, the employment of labor on rational lines, female education, widow remarriage, removal of caste restrictions, enactment of legislations, and such other matters. Further, the rationalistic way of thinking of the Christian missionaries, linked with modern science, had a great appeal to the Indian intellectual. Moreover, the impact of Western education affected the Indian mind. When the Indian reformers learned about liberal ideas and equality of rights among sexes in European countries, they were much affected by their social system. As the new knowledge spread, more and more thinking Indians introduced to a new sense of values and felt uneasy over the social customs which the new sense of values condemned. After independence, the expansion of welfare services in every dimensions was seen in all the national planning and development programs. Accordingly, the approaches and fields of social work profession also have changed and became wider to cover all integrated activities required to meet the present challenges. Hence, we can say that the social work profession took endeavor to relate with the ground realities of the nation in current times. As discussed in this chapter, that all the concepts and approaches of the modern social work practice are deep rooted in all our efforts of Indian planning and development programs. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.